Nama Om Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Shrimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Namani Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Chaline Nivasisha Sunyavari Pushtatada Satarine Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shiva Sari Gaura Bhaktavinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Ram Hare Hare. Okay, Hare Krishna. So you can see on the screen here, I recently remembered that I had compiled the contents of the Suddha Bhakti Cintamani. So I thought it'd perhaps be good to start with to give you some idea where we're going in parts 1 and 2, at least. So to give a good idea of direction that we're going in. So this is what we've covered as of today, the seed of devotion, chapter 1. So we spoke about sambandha, knowledge of relationship, a basic simple definition of devotional service, and we had a nice discussion how devotion awakens. I think, and then last week we specifically spoke about the seed of devotion and what that is exactly. In essence, it's the rules and methods given by the spiritual master. And this is chapter 2. We're going to be looking at this today, getting into the semblance of devotion and the effects of the modes. And this discussion on semblance of devotion, it goes on for a good few chapters. So to give you an idea where we're going, so then we're going to speak about reflective semblance of faith and shadowy semblance of faith. Very interesting discussion. And then from there, chapter 4, we're going to speak about the 4 impure motives for devotion. That's based on Bhagavad Gita, Chaturveda Bhajanti Mam Sukritina Arjuna. And then we're going to speak a little bit today, but here specifically on the indirect path to Krishna. And then more, the 3 types of semblance of devotion. And there's more. Chapter 5 is going to speak more on the semblance of devotion. And Marge mentions the reason why it's good to have a really good grasp of a semblance of devotion, because of 2 reasons. One, it helps us to ascertain whether we are actually cultivating the Bhakti Lada Bija of pure devotion. And also, he mentions it's good as well is when we're preaching to others to be able to know at what level they are at and whether they're ready to accept the principles of pure devotion. So that's why quite a bit of time is spent on it here. Subdivisions of mixed devotion, and then how mixed devotion leads to pure devotion, and then transition to pure faith and devotion. Hare Krishna devotees who've just joined us, we're just going through the contents of the first part, just to give you an idea of where we're going to begin with in this study. Yeah. And then finally, after chapter 5, we get speaking about pure devotional service. Okay. Then I quickly flash the slides out. We'll be looking at Rupa Goswami's definition based on Anyavilas, the Sunyam verse from the Nectar of Devotion. And then like that, we expand primary characteristics and secondary characteristics, qualification and advancement, etc., etc. Now, I won't go through the whole book and the contents. It might take an hour. But just to give you an idea, yeah. So we've covered this, and we're going to look at the semblance of devotion today. Then finally, part 2 speaks about pure devotional service. Okay. Right, now let's get back to where we left off last week. Now, this is where we left off last week. We went into chapter 2. And again, I've another summary of what we discussed so far. I mean, I find it quite good to have a good grasp of the subject as it progresses. So here this is what we discussed for the last 4 sessions, and last week we discussed the first sprout to appear, and we gave some definitions of pure faith and the characteristics of pure faith. Now, I'm just going to quickly show you the slides just as a reminder. So the first sprout to appear from the seed of pure devotion is faith, pure faith, and how that develops. We gave a little synopsis on that. Agnata Sukriti, this is or unknowing devotional acts that leads one to perhaps associate with devotees, and that association has quite a profound effect. Then one develops trust in the devotees, and one develops also faith in the scriptures that devotees are speaking from and basing their lives on. Then we gave this definition of Shraddha, of pure Shraddha. Let's read it. It's good to hear it again. Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental love and service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable for the discharge of devotional service. And just a request, if you can have your cameras on, then that helps me. It's much better for me if it's possible. I find it easier to speak when I can see people rather than just speaking into a computer. So if it's possible, if you can please put cameras on. Jai, I can see the Vaishnavas. Haribol, thank you. Hare Krishna. All right. So definition of confident, firm faith, and specifically, these are the characteristics that we gave. You have trust in scripture, and by following the scripture, by associating with the devotees, one has a tangible taste for devotional activities, for Krishna consciousness. And that in itself causes that taste that one gets, that causes one to further commit oneself to the activities of devotional service. So increased strength. Okay. And this is where we left off last week, if I remember correctly. So again, please, dear devotees, you're welcome to ask questions. You can unmute, you can raise your hand, or you can also put into the chat. Okay? You ready? Hare Krishna. All right. So this is a semblance. So this is a dictionary definition of semblance. It's good to keep in mind as we're discussing this. So it's something that appears, like here, it's a dictionary definition, the outward appearance or apparent form of something, especially when the reality is different. So this is what is meant by semblance of faith in comparison to someone who has pure faith. Okay, so pure faith is based on sambandha, or one's relationship with the Lord, and ultimately to actually please Him. Whereas an impure faith is based on a distorted knowledge, and often it's motivated by material desires. Remember last week we showed that slide of the prosperity preachers who are specifically going to church in order to become materially wealthy. Yeah, so they're going to church, they're going to the temple, but it's not actually pure devotion. It's a semblance. Yeah. So now impure faith is the first sprout from the creeper of mixed devotion. So just as pure faith is the first sprout of the creeper of pure devotion. Yeah. So as we've already explained, we actually explained it in chapter 1. So that seed of impure devotion is is based on false knowledge. Yeah. So the same way that characteristics, of impure faith is based on, trust, taste, and strength. So in that way, as we mentioned, it does resemble pure faith. But because this impure faith, this semblance of pure faith, it doesn't resemble this. Yeah. Where one is completely here. Yeah. It doesn't resemble exclusive dedication and a full dependence on Krishna. So it's not going to lead to the ultimate goal of life, going back to Godhead. So in other words, exclusive devotion and full dependence on Krishna, that's unique to pure faith. Yeah, that's specifically unique to pure faith, exclusive devotion and full dependence on Krishna. Now let's just read this verse again. So this is pure faith. Shraddha is confident, firm faith that by rendering transcendental loving service to Krishna, one automatically performs all subsidiary activities. Such faith is favorable to the discharge of devotional service. Yeah? So it's exclusive dedication, exclusive faith in Krishna. Yeah. So now, why is it? Or it could say it's by misfortune, or you could say it's a lack of discrimination that people receive seeds other than the Bhakti ladder bija. Now, what's also brought up, even a greater misfortune, one could say, is that sometimes it's seen that someone may receive the seed of pure devotion, but they allow the creeper of pure devotion to become stunted. And that we're going to look at today, to become stunted by non-devotional weeds. So that's why this study of a semblance of devotion is very interesting, because it's going to give us the tools by which we can do the weeding in our garden of devotion. Yeah. So now, if it's neglected, then it can lead to a tainted perspective of the goal of life, which is pure devotion. So it may lead to to material, that we're rendering devotional service solely for material motives. Okay. Again, if there's any questions on this, please feel free to ask. Okay. So just summarizing, faith is connected, the faith connected to bhakti is of two types. Yeah. Pure and transcendental faith, Shraddha, and then there's a semblance of faith, which is also known as Shraddha Bas. Now, the seed, you following so far? So the seed of the creeper of the semblance of devotion, so it's called a bas, bhakti ladder bija, that's planted in the hearts through contact with incomplete, imperfect, or distorted knowledge. So the goal of life is not to go back to Godhead. The goal of life, or the goal of the religious practice, is not to attain love of Godhead. Yeah. So although it's a semblance, they're still theistic to some degree, but they have impure knowledge, so they're practicing a semblance of what is actually pure devotion. Okay. As we mentioned earlier, so we might again just on this point. So what's the relevance of studying a semblance of faith? So it's also, as we will discuss, it's also known as the indirect path to devotion, because Prabhupada is giving us, he's giving, or our International Society for Krishna Consciousness is giving everyone pure faith. Yeah. So in other words, by understanding the indirect path, it's relevant because even though we have received the seed of pure devotion, we need to really carefully examine whether we have fully accepted it, yeah, properly, cultivated it. Yeah, have we really fully accepted it? Are we cultivating it, and are we protecting it from unwanted creepers? Okay? So, in other words, if for some reason you sometimes devotees stray from the path of pure faith and pure devotion, we must be able to recognize such deviations, yeah, by their symptoms and rectify them. So then what's discussed is what's the possible causes of distraction on the path of pure faith. So here in the slide, it's not, first one here, not properly accepting the seed or the spiritual master's instruction. Yeah. So Prabhupada, he mentions this, and we'll read from the purple in the Majja Lila that's coming up. So Prabhupada here, at least in the Majja Lila, which we'll read a little bit later, so Prabhupada makes it clear that devotees must carefully, just like you take a seed in the, if anyone got any gardening experience, it's good you can picture when you plant a seed, then you have to take care of it. You have to plant it in a particular, you plant it and then you water it and you make sure there's no weeds that are going to strangle the plant. So Prabhupada says that devotees must carefully accept the seed of pure devotion. Yeah, so he defines again that seed, as we remember, this Bhakti Lada Bija, as the instructions that give the methods, rules, and regulations by which one is perfectly trained in Krishna consciousness. So if one is not following the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, then what one is uprooting the seed of pure devotion, or one is not watering it properly. You know, one is not uprooting unwanted creepers. So that's when it may be seen if one is not following the orders of the directions of the spiritual master, or they may come to some type of personal bias in some material motivation, then so they're not properly nourishing the seed of pure devotion. So it may be seen that after many years, devotees or people may gradually go away from practicing the path of pure devotion. And Prabhupada mentions here, just quoting from Chaitanya Charitamrita, one who has not properly heard from the spiritual master, or who does not follow the regulative principles, excuse me, is not fit for chanting kirtan. So read that again. One who has not properly heard from the spiritual master, so if they haven't properly heard, then they're not following the regulative principles. If they're not following regular principles, someone is not fit for chanting. So in short, what we're saying here is that improper hearing results from kind of impotent chanting, of hearing and chanting. Yeah. So the effect of that is then the pure devotion is not going to sprout. So and also here, if one is watering the seed of devotional service, there may be watering the seed of devotional service, but if one engages in unbecoming behavior, we may even uproot the very creeper that we are trying to cultivate. And Prabhupada, he's quite straightforward here. Someone could read this on the slide here. This is directly from Chaitanya Charitamrita Majja Lila.
I
Can you
can
read
read
this
it
out?
for you, Prabhu.
Yes, thank you.
Hare Krishna. Giving up the regulative principles and living according to one's whims is compared to a mad elephant, which by force uproots the bhakti lata and breaks it to pieces. Such an offense is especially created when one disobeys the instructions of the spiritual master. As soon as one is deviated from the spiritual master's instructions, the uprooting of the bhakti lata begins, and gradually all the leaves dry up. Hare
Okay,
Krishna.
thank you. So quite straightforward here, yeah? As soon as one is deviated from the spiritual master's instructions, and remember, that's the seed of devotion. If one deviates from that, you know, the uprooting of the bhakti ladder bija begins, and gradually the leaves dry up. So, in other words, when it may be, as we mentioned last week, was that slide we showed the tangling maze of mundane topics. So when we're habituated to hearing mundane topics unrelated to devotional service, that may then unwanted creepers grow alongside the bhakti ladder, the bhakti lata. And sometimes it may not one may not be able to distinguish the difference. One thinks that one is engaged in the activities of pure devotional service. Yep. But it may be just a weed that they're cultivating. It may be a specific desire, they're doing specific devotional activities, but it may be a weed. They may be doing those devotional activities for name, fame, adoration, etc. They're really not cultivating what is understood to be pure devotion. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Rupa Goswami, in Lord Chaitanya's teachings to Rupa Goswami, he goes into quite some detail about this. And Lord Chaitanya, he was emphatic that he warns in teachings to Rupa Goswami about the creepers of worldly desire and liberation. He mentions that they embrace and strangle the Bhakti Lada Bija. So just the votes coming in, just letting them in. Hare Krishna. So now here in Majja Lila, chapter 19, text 159, there's a wonderful purport where Bhakti Siddhanta, actually Prabhupada's quoting Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So to assist us in identifying unwanted creepers, actually Lord Chaitanya classifies them into broad categories. So here they are here. These are broad categories, so there's many subcategories within here. But these are broad, this is a broad definition. So unacceptable behavior, diplomatic behavior, he mentions animal killing, mundane profiteering, striving to be adored, striving for mundane popularity. So these are things that Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur has identified in those who are supposedly practicing devotion to Krishna. Yeah. So he's given us a very clear understanding, very clear understanding of what is not acceptable when if one is engaged in pure devotional service. So obviously animal killing should be an obvious one. But here, diplomatic behavior, mundane profiteering, especially when one is running a temple, was running a temple, then or even engaging in, devotee that wealth may come, adoration may come. So he mentions this striving to be adored, striving for mundane popularity. So it may be that one is a great speaker, maybe that one is a great kirtaniya, but if they're motivated, if there's some weeds there, they're striving to be well known or famous or striving for popularity. So these are seen as obstacles of the real creeper of pure devotion. So Lord Chaitanya mentions one should be very careful to avoid all these unwanted things. Again, because sometimes these creepers look exactly like the bhakti ladder, but it may be just watering our own material desires. So they appear the same size. He mentions here, this is directly from Chaitanya Charitamrita, they may appear to be the same size, the same species when they are packed together with the bhakti creeper. But in spite of this, the creepers are called upashaka, so they're unwanted. So in other words, we have to pay attention. So we have to pay attention to hearing and chanting. We have to the water of the hearing and chanting. Otherwise, if we don't pay attention, then the water of the hearing and chanting will actually go to the weeds instead of the devotional creeper. So we're engaging Shravan and Kirtan, but unless we're uprooting these weeds, what we're doing may be just watering the weeds. Now, I'm just going to share this purport now. 1 second, from Majjalila 19,159. So 1 second. Everyone's following so far? Any comments, questions on this? It's not going over everyone's head, I hope.
Prabhu, unacceptable
Yes,
behavior. I mean, can you expand a little bit on that? And diplomatic?
Yeah, well, 1 second. I just want to bring up the... Okay, you can see... Can you see the folio here?
Can't
Yes.
see folio.
Yeah, okay.
Very,
So,
very
yeah,
faintly.
faintly, yeah?
Yeah, very faint. I mean,
Okay.
the
See a
mobile, I
list,
can't read
Bible.
much.
No, it's just a list of things.
Just a list. Okay, 1 second, perhaps. Let's get back here. Excuse me. Hare Krishna. Sorry, getting back here. Okay, so sorry about that. I try and find it in a second. Yeah. So first, sorry, Mavi Vishani, just your question again.
Just a little bit more explanation on unacceptable behavior and diplomatic behavior.
Yeah. Well, I could put that out. What would devotees say? Anyone could have some suggestions. What is actually unacceptable behavior? What might Bhaktisiddhanta be saying? Or yes,
criticism.
criticism. Yes, for sure. One is criticizing devotees. Anything else?
Gossip.
Sorry?
Gossiping.
Not following the Vaishnava etiquettes, not behaving properly.
Alexander, did you say something? I couldn't quite hear it.
Gossiping. Gossiping.
Gossiping. Okay, thank you. Yeah, so you could say Prajalpa and Mother Chandravali, you said something there as well.
Not following the proper etiquettes.
Yeah, not following the proper etiquette. Just writing this down. Following proper etiquette. Perhaps. Any more we can think of? There's plenty.
Yeah,
Criticizing
all
Prajalpa.
the ones that in Nectar of Devotions, not following those, that covers all these.
Yeah.
Showing something and doing something else,
Yeah, that's diplomatic, being diplomatic, not being straightforward.
Yeah.
Is one. So now let's see what is said here in Majalila in this wonderful purple. So I'm just going to bring that up. Give me 1 second. I want to bring this up to read it. Majalila 19159. Okay, you can see this?
Yeah.
Yes.
Great, fantastic. All right, so let's read through this, and I'll just read through it and we'll comment as we go. So, Nasida Acharya Kutinati Jiva Himsana Labha Puja Pratishtadi Yata Upashakagan. So, some unnecessary creepers growing with the bhakti creeper are creepers of behavior, unacceptable for those trying to attain perfection. Diplomatic behavior, animal killing, mundane profiteering, mundane adoration, and mundane importance. All these are unwanted creepers. So that's, and the purple, this is what we just described. This is the verse we just read, and the purple. There is a certain pattern of behavior prescribed for those actually trying to become perfect. In our Krishna consciousness movement, we advise our students not to eat meat, not to gamble, not to engage in illicit sex, and not to indulge in intoxication. All right, so this is unacceptable behavior. People who indulge in these activities can never become perfect. Therefore, these regulative principles are for those interested in becoming perfect and going back to Godhead. So this is unacceptable behavior. So we have our 4 regulative principles. Okay, so acting outside of that, Prabhupada is explaining here as unacceptable behavior. Kutinati, or diplomatic behavior, cannot satisfy the Atma, the soul. It cannot even satisfy the body or the mind. The culprit mind is always suspicious. Therefore, our dealings should be always straightforward and approved by the Vedic authorities. So a devotee has nothing to hide. What is inside is the same as what is outside. He's generally materialistic, and people or politicians, they're very diplomatic. They actually saying one thing, but they mean something else. But devotees should be honest, just like an open book. So this diplomatic behavior is not favorable for developing the Bhakti Lada Bija. This is what has been described here. So kutinati, or diplomatic behavior. Therefore, our dealings should be straightforward and approved by Vedic authorities. If we treat people diplomatically or duplicitously, our spiritual advancement is obstructed. Yeah. Jiva himsa refers to the killing of animals or to envy of other living entities. The killing of poor animals is undoubtedly due to envy of those animals. The human form is meant for the understanding of Krishna consciousness, atato brahma jignasa, for inquiring about the supreme Brahman. In the human form, everyone has a chance to understand the supreme Brahman. The so-called leaders of human society do not know the real aim of human life and are therefore busy with economic development. This is misleading. Every state and every society is busy trying to improve the quality of eating, sleeping, mating, and defending. This human form of life is meant for more than these 4 animal principles. Eating, sleeping, mating, and defending are problems found in the animal kingdom, and the animals have solved these problems without difficulty. Why should human society be so busy trying to solve these problems. The difficulty is that people are not educated to understand this simple philosophy. They think that advancement of civilization means increasing sense gratification. So then Prabhupada continues, there are many religious propagandists who do not know the ultimate problem, how the ultimate problems of life can be solved. And they also try to educate people in the form of sense gratification. This is also Jiva Himsa, Jiva Himsana. Real knowledge is not given, and religionists mislead the general populace. I think one place we was reading just recently in our readings on Bhagavad Gita, that Prabhupada actually describes violence as being not telling someone about Krishna. So he's saying that here similarly. They do not know the ultimate problems of life can be solved, so they also try to educate people in a form of sense gratification. This is also Jiva Himsana. Real knowledge is not given, and religionists mislead the general populace. As far as material profits are concerned, one should know that whatever material profit one has must be abandoned at the time of death. Unfortunately, people do not know that there is life after death. Therefore, mundane people waste their time amassing material profit, which has to be left behind at the time of death. Such profit has no eternal benefit. Similarly, adoration by mundane people is valueless, because after death one has to accept another body. Material adoration and titles are decorations that cannot be carried over to the next body. In this life, everything is forgotten. Then summarizing, he explains, all these obstructions have been described in this verse as unwanted creepers. They simply present obstacles for the real creeper, the bhakti ladder. One should be very careful to avoid all these unwanted things. Sometimes these unwanted creepers look exactly like the bhakti creeper. They appear to be of the same size and same species when they are packed together with the bhakti creeper. But in spite of this, the creepers are called upashaka. A pure devotee can distinguish between the bhakti creeper and the mundane creeper, and he's very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. So just repeat that again. A pure devotee can distinguish between the bhakti creeper and the mundane creeper, and he's very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. Yeah. So I mentioned last week that sometimes, so what we're covering sometimes it's quite sobering, because we're actually getting a chance to look into our heart. And again, have we actually accepted the Bhakti Ladda Bija? Are we actually really developing pure devotion, or are there some unwanted creepers which we are developing instead? Yes. Any questions or comments on that? Yeah, Navina, did I pronounce it right?
Nirvana.
Nirvana, excuse me.
Yes.
Hare
No
Krishna.
problem,
Yes, ma'am.
Prabhu. So, Prabhu, our aim should be to identify the creepers, and then it should also be to rectify our behavior, isn't it?
Yes, that's why we're having this discussion. Yeah, before we actually speak about what is actually pure devotion, Suddha Bhakti Cintamani spends quite some time speaking about the semblance of devotion. Yeah, and there's more chapters as I described in the beginning. So we have to be introspective. We have to be introspective, and the more we understand about pure devotion as well, then the more we can identify the actual weeds. Yeah, is that okay, Nirvana? Do you have a question based on that? For anything further?
Yes, that's it, Prabhu. Yeah, I was just wondering because it's just identifying what the problem is and then not making a concerted effort to rectify it.
Yeah, and that's called anartha nivritti. It's a specific stage of devotion where we identify impurity. And depending on the impurity, there's different ways we may go about purifying that. As in
Thank you.
some cases, it may be quite straightforward that that we have to reject it. We have to uproot it. And anybody else? Any questions? So again, here they are again. This is on. I took this from this purple. Now, 1 second. Oh, wrong slide. 1 second here. Yeah. So again, just what Mother Navina, the question she was asking. So this is the first reason why we're studying the semblance of faith, so we can identify and avoid unwanted habits. Yeah, and as I mentioned in the beginning, the second reason is to also help those who may not have had the good fortune to have awakened pure faith. Yeah. So just see if someone does, just says someone who really doesn't know wants to purchase gold, but because they don't have knowledge, then they purchase something that's just gold plated instead of solid gold. So in other words, if someone has really meager piety, then there's a good chance they're going to get drawn to the indirect path instead of the direct path, which is pure devotional service. So it really helps if we're preaching is for us to be able to recognize symptoms of impure faith and how to patiently guide persons to actually pure faith. So this is one of the main things that we're doing, because our society attracts many people from the Hindu community. But often their idea of worship, as you know, is materially motivated, but they're attracted to the temple. So a lot of preaching is actually bringing them to the path of pure devotion. It's educating them in what is actually real devotion to God. And not just Hindus, but also, as we mentioned last week, even some persons, they're Christians and they're just worshipping for material adoration. So we can really, if they're ready to listen, we can explain what is real pure devotion. Yeah. Now, having said that, despite this, you could say the inferiority of this indirect path, Krishna does recommend it in the Bhagavad Gita to those who don't have so much faith or who are ignorant of the path of pure devotion. And there's this verse here. Someone like to read this verse? This is from chapter 7, text 21. Chandravali, you can read.
Yeah. So as not to disrupt the minds of ignorant men attached to the fruitive result of prescribed duties, a learned person should not induce them to stop work. Rather, by working in the spirit of devotion, he should engage them in all sorts of activities for the gradual development of Krishna consciousness.
Yeah. Buddhi Bedam Janayat Agana Kama Sanginam Chosit Savakamani Vidvan Yukta Samacharaha. So it may be some situation here is described that it may be someone's not ready to accept the path of pure devotion. They're too attached. So instead we engage them in acts of devotion. We try and inspire them, give some of the fruits of their activities to Krishna, or you engage in some aspect of devotional service. If you tell them you should give up, you shouldn't come to the temple, you shouldn't pray to Krishna, you shouldn't pray unless it's pure. Let them come and engage them in acts of devotion. So working in the spirit of devotion, they can be engaged in all sorts of activities. And also, so Krishna also at the same time, he's going to give them faith. Even if they're worshipping demigods, Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita that he's given them faith to actually do that. And there's this verse here. Someone could read this verse. This is from 7th chapter again.
I am in everyone's heart as a supersoul. As soon as one decides to worship some demigod, I make his faith steady so that he can devote himself to that particular deity. Bhagavad Gita 7.21.
Yeah, so Krishna, he's doing more than just he's just more than just steady faith of someone who's material. He actually fulfills their desires. So okay, they're worshipping demigods, but it's actually the demigods can only fulfill the desires of their worshippers by the grace of Krishna. So it's Krishna who indirectly is empowering these demigods to fulfill their followers' material desires. So one might say, so why is Krishna reciprocating in this way? Yeah. So in other words, what Krishna's doing is he's propagating the Vedas to instill some type of faith. Yeah, some type of faith in the Vedic system. Even if that faith is not completely in line with pure devotion, they got faith in the Vedic path. So it's better than having no faith. So we could say, so directly or indirectly, by following scripture injunctions, people actually commit to a path that ultimately leads to Krishna. And that's mentioned in chapter 4, text 11. Yayata mam papadyante tam tateva bhajameham. So Krishna explains that ultimately, by following this Vedic path, it will lead to Krishna, ultimately, because it gives them faith in the principle. In other words, they're not just atheists, they have some faith in the higher Vedic principles. And by the grace, as we've mentioned, by the grace of association with devotees, so these persons have got faith, so they come to the temple or they meet devotees. Because of their piety from following the Veda, then they're ready to hear from devotees. Then devotees start speaking to them about principles of pure faith to Krishna and to completely depend upon Krishna. Yeah. So in other words, sorry, carry on.
Now I was thinking, can we also say that because of minute independence, Krishna doesn't disturb you, he'll just show you the way up.
Yeah, he's allowing us to fulfill one's material desires. Of course, you can never fulfill your material desires because you have so many. But in other words, it's by Krishna, but by following the Vedic path, one has faith. Yeah, so yeah. Someone else, there was a question there.
Krishna Prabhu, I was just saying.
Yes, please.
Even someone is coming. Okay, I passed the exam. I'm going to get some flowers to the Lord. So that itself is because you're reciprocating your love because Krishna helped you to pass the exam. So that is also a reciprocation, isn't it, Prabhu?
Yeah. Same as when you see people, they come to a temple and they put their exam papers on the altar. Obviously,
Yeah.
They're obviously praying to Krishna. It's good. Akamo Sava Kamo Moksha Kamo Udadadi. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In one sense, it's actually good. They may be coming for something material, but the point here is we don't want to discourage them. Again, this verse mentions we should engage them and we should
That is better than going to a demigod.
Yeah, we should not induce them. Yeah, better than going to demigods, they come to Krishna, at least work in the spirit of devotion. Yeah. So therefore it's good for us to be somewhat observant when we're preaching. So sometimes we might have to temporarily concede to their materially motivated reasons for worship. Because it may be that we cannot, because they're not going to convert overnight. So instead we engage them in acts of devotion by gradually they become purified. So even sometimes you see they may accept Krishna's divinity, even engage in some aspects of devotion, worshipping him, chanting his names, etc. But their acceptance of Krishna is sometimes it's very selective, and it doesn't accommodate full surrender. So they don't want to hear that one should give up all duties and surrender everything. Shavadamam priyachatya. Yeah. They want to hear that have a right to perform their prescribed duty. Karma ivakarasti matfadeshu karjanaha. Yeah. You have a right to perform your prescribed duty. They're not really ready to hear Shavadamam priyachatya. Yeah. Now, yeah, maybe so to the extent of their spiritual conviction, to the efforts to artificially accelerate their conviction can sometimes prove counterproductive. If we're trying to preach to someone and we're trying to preach them, it may be trying to preach them principles of pure devotion, just give up everything. It may be counterproductive. They may distance themselves. Yeah. So in other words, if they're pressed too hard, then materialistic, because they devotees, sometimes they withdraw. Sometimes may one withdraw from service, or they may give up any type of Krishna consciousness to trying to press them too hard. Then it may become, in some instances, they may go to other, there's plenty of other types of temples or mats you can go to, where it's encouraged, actually, material motivation is encouraged. Yeah. So it's important to understand, but it's good to understand the semblance of faith. And Prabhupada says here, this is again from that purport that we just read. A pure devotee can distinguish between the Bhakti Kripa and the mundane Kripa. And he is very alert to distinguish them and keep them separate. Okay. Now, also another topic in understanding the semblance of faith, it's also good to recognize how the modes of material nature can influence the kripa of devotion. So originally, because we're all parts and parcels of Krishna, we have a constitutional pure faith, which is actually transcendental, as being part and parcel of Krishna. But in contact with material nature, that faith becomes distorted because it's influenced by many other things. So when one is conditioned, then one's faith is a semblance of a real faith. In other words, it's it's an effect of the modes of nature, passion, goodness, and ignorance. Yeah. So we see some people they have faith in a particular political leader. Yeah, so they think they have a particular faith in some famous people or etc. etc. Yeah. So it's there, the faith is there, but it's just misdirected to something material. Either something under the mode of passion or ignorance. Yeah. So someone could read this verse here in the slide.
Can I, Prabhu?
Yeah, go ahead.
Faith Faith directed toward spiritual life is in the mode of goodness. Faith rooted in fruitive work is in the mode of passion. Faith residing in irreligious activities is in the mode of ignorance. But faith in my devotional service is purely transcendental. Srimad Bhagavatam 11.25.27.
Yeah. So faith is the natural characteristic of any jiva. But where they place that faith depends on what particular mode of nature they are in. Yeah. So some people worship materialists, politicians, or demons, even in the Srimad Bhagavatam's many demons people may worship. Yeah. So basically everyone's got faith, but have faith in different things because they're influenced by the modes of nature. Yeah. So there's more discussion on this. We won't get into all the details, but more discussion can be found in the third canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam, where Lord Kapila describes how the modes of nature touch even the Lord's devotees. So Lord Kapila says, this is from the third canto, chapter 29, text 7. This is the beginning of the chapter. Lord Kapila, the personality of Godhead, replied, "O noble lady, there are multifarious paths of devotional service in terms of their different qualities of the executor." So we might naturally be interested to know if we're interested to know the details of how the Vaishnava's faith is influenced by the modes of material, by the modes of nature. You can read more there. We won't get into it here fully, but simply put, practicing devotees, and that's us, we have to take shelter of the devotees. Yeah, and those are on the path of pure devotion. Yeah, and hear their instructions. Yeah. And then if we can follow the devotees, then we won't succumb to our lower nature. So sometimes rather than the mercy of the devotees dominating one's faith, yeah, such things sometimes the results of offenses, thirst for the temporary and weakness of the heart infiltrate. If one's succumbing to a lower nature, not accepting the instructions of the pure Vaishnavas. Yeah. And then Srila Prabhupada, he elaborates here. Just read this here. A conditioned soul is hampered by 4 defects. He is sure to commit mistakes. He is sure to become illusioned. He has the tendency to cheat others. And his senses are imperfect. Consequently, we have to take direction from liberated persons. This Krishna conscious movement directly receives instructions from the Supreme Personality of Godhead via persons who are strictly following his instructions. Although a follower may not be a liberated person, if he follows the Supreme Liberated Personality of Godhead, his actions are naturally liberated from the contamination of material nature. That's from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 18, Text 5. That's the purple. So, again, how can we free ourselves from the influence of the modes of nature and regain pure faith? The only hope to do so is to stay with and hear from the Vaishnavas, of those who do have pure faith, and those who are situated in transcendental knowledge. This will help us to be free from the influence of the lower modes of nature. Okay. All right. Let's just pause there. I've got to get on to another class now. I think some devotees may be taking part in our Bajari training. So we're doing right, 7 o'clock. So thank you, everyone, for your kind attention. This might have been a bit quite purifying to hear. so we can have a look at our hearts. We can be a bit introspective again. Have we accepted these? Are we cultivating? Have we accepted pure devotion? Are we cultivating pure devotion, or is there some weeds there that we're cultivating instead? And also, in regards to instructing others as well, some may not be ready to hear the path of direct, complete surrender to Krishna. They may not be ready for it. So instead, we may engage them gradually and acts of devotion, and then gradually they may be ready to hear these principles. Okay? So thank you for your kind attention. And we'll pick up next week on the next chapter. Okay? Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna
Hare
Krishna, Hare
Krishna.
Hare, Hare Ram,
Hare
Ram,
Hare
Ram
Ram
Ram,
Ram
Hare
Hare
Hare,
Hare.
Hare Bol.